In 1988, Shenandoah, Iowa, Bob decided to go home and check on his wife, Cindy. He had received 2 calls from Cindy's boss saying that Cindy had never arrived to work. The first call, he figured that maybe she was taking a nap and she overslept. But once he got the second call, he ended up going back home to check and see what happened. When he got home, he stumbled upon Cindy's lifeless, bloody corpse on the floor. Concerned, Bob knew he must call the police to help his wife. However, before he did that, Bob decided to take the dog for a walk. Naturally, this raised a lot of eyebrows with the police. I mean, your wife is on the floor appearing to be lifeless, and you take your dog outside? But I've never been married, so I'm not quite sure what the protocol is for this such thing. Obviously, the police were very suspicious of Bob and his actions, not only because he took the dog out during a crucial time, but also because of his odd mannerisms. You see, Bob was very relaxed for someone whose wife was just brutally murdered. That was probably because Bob didn't think that his wife had been murdered. He thought his wife had suffered a bizarre accident, and the police looked at him crazy because, bro, did you not see all the blood? Shortly after the police arrived, Bob and Cindy's only son, John, showed up and was devastated about the news of his mother. Because him and his dad had similar thought processes, he also thought that the mother suffered from a terrible accident. As the police continued to talk to Bob, he seemed really weird. He showed little to no emotion, at least not the type of emotion from a grieving husband that normally husbands would show. He didn't seem to be sad. He, in fact, treated the situation like it was a regular day. As the police spoke to Bob, they asked him about their marriage and discovered that there were arguments between him and his wife, which also raised a lot of eyebrows. Perplexed by John's casual demeanor, the police asked John to take a polygraph test. A polygraph test, or a lie detector test, measures biological body functions to determine if you're being deceptive in any of the questions that they ask you. Often not admissible in court, but sometimes the body lies, police use this as a tactic to put the squeeze on potential suspects, and in this case, they wanted to use it to see if Bob could be guilty. Bob, of course, agrees to take the polygraph test because he feels like whatever you guys need to solve the murder, I'm here for it. And surprise, surprise, he failed. The police just knew that they had their man and took DNA evidence from Bob to compare against the fingerprints that had been left at the scene of the crime. They also looked at Bob's son, John, who admitted that him and his mother had an argument earlier and he said some pretty awful things to her. Little John also had a quirkiness about him, just like his father did, and appeared to be a potential suspect. However, once they spoke to him, he was ruled out because he was at school during the time of the murder, which was confirmed by numerous eyewitness reports. His boss dropped an additional bombshell stating that Bob went home for lunch and then returned back to work with changed clothes. Those clothes that he was wearing previously were put in a washer, which of course would have washed away any type of potential evidence. At this point, this guy looks like he did it completely. The police are like, oh my God, this guy did it. He's guilty. Let's get him now. All they had to do was wait for the fingerprint results to come back and they would have their killer. After the police purchased their champagne for celebration, the fingerprints results came back and it was not a match. Shocked, the police just knew that they had their killer, but in the 80s, where they relied heavily on fingerprints, they realized that was a lie. Faced with disappointment, the police had to go back to the drawing board because at this point, they had no suspects. So the son was ruled out, the father was ruled out. Who else had a reason to kill Cindy? Months went by and the police were frustrated. They had no leads and it eventually halted the case. No one knew who was doing it. There were no clues. And at this point, the police just didn't know what to do. I mean, Shenandoah was a quiet town. Why is all of this happening? They were just eating donuts. Now they have to figure out crimes. This is just outrageous. Not only did police have to figure out who killed her, there were also random arsons happening around the city. Finally, at one of the fires, there was a clue left. Someone who referred to themselves as the Night Stalker said that they were responsible for all the fires that were happening around town, and he also killed Cindy. Dun, dun, dun! Now, we knew this was not the real Night Stalker serial killer because he was located in California and had been caught at the time of this. So they knew it was a copycat. As they did with Cindy's crime scene, the police took fingerprints from the letter, but unfortunately, those prints did not match any of the prints in the database. Once again, the police had hit a dead end and they were just super stumped. I mean, it's Shenandoah, Iowa. It's less than 5,000 people in this town. How hard could it be to find a murderer? Obviously pretty hard because the police were stumped. One day, a young man named John wandered into the police office. Not Cindy's and Bob's son John, but a different John. He had a wild story to tell, and the police were all ears. You see, John was hanging out with his friend Jim. It's just a regular day of doing fuckboy shit. When John out the blue says, "Hey, you know those fires in town?" I did that. John was like, "Oh, snap, you tough, Jim." Jim then proceeded to say, "You know that lady who was killed, Cindy? I did that too." And John was like, "No way, bro." And Jim was like, "Yes way, bro." And John was like, "Nah." And Jim was like, "Yeah." Realizing that John did not believe him, Jim then goes and shows him the knife that was used in the murder of Cindy. Once John finally believed Jim, Jim made John swear to never tell anyone. However, Jim miscalculated one thing. John was not about that life. John hightailed it straight to the police because he had a story to tell. He said this guy not only did the fires, but he also killed Cindy. And at first he was going to keep it a secret because that guy is crazy. But then he started realizing, dude, this is one of my best friends. And finally, this guy has been in my house. He could have did that to my mom. And if he killed their mom, he's going to kill my mom. Y'all have to put this ninja under the jail. So let's step back. Who is Jim? Jim came from a rough family. He had a really bad relationship with his dad. Like, he just hated his dad to the nth power. And while Cindy was like a mother to him. She encouraged him. She tried to be there for him when his family was not. She saw something in Jim that others did not see. Let's get back to the present. Well, present 1988. So the police go and pick up Jim. And at first he was like, "No, it wasn't me, baby. It was somebody else. You know, you got to try it." But after additional pressure, he finally admitted that he was the one who committed the fires and he killed Cindy. Here's how it happened. One day, Jim was just out and about and he was just mad at his dad and he thought, I should kill that guy. But because, that sounds crazy, Jim was like, I can't take that man down. I don't want that work. So he ended up saying that he needed to take somebody else down, someone who's easier. And unfortunately, that target was Cindy. He stopped by the house, and Cindy, being the kind soul that she was, she invited him in. He asked for a glass of water, and while she was getting that glass of water, that's when he attacked her. Even worse was John, not the guy who told on John, but Cindy and Bob's son John was best friends with Jim, the killer. The son, John, would say that Jim told him once that they were brothers, and he believed it. And at the end of the day, he felt like he was responsible for his mother's death, because if it wasn't for him, she would have never known that Jim boy. He was super sorry that he introduced Jim into their life, and he misses his mom only in days that end in Y. Jim was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. I hope John realizes that you're not at fault for that, John, and I hope you find peace.